Today we're looking at the Loryta IPC-T2431T-AS. We just got 2 of these. Can you guess how many cameras we have now?
28 million.
No, we only have 12, but that's still a lot. This is also the first turret-style camera or eyeball-style camera that we've tried. We started off our system with the sort of traditional bullet-style camera. We've tried a dome camera. We've tried a doorbell camera. Now, supposedly from what I've read, the turret-style cameras don't attract spider webs as much. So you get the wire concealment benefits of a dome camera without the sort of rounded off corners on the picture. Like most of my other cameras, it does use power over Ethernet. Now let's pause for a satisfying plastic rip. Ah, that felt good. This camera has a microphone. It can be mounted on a wall, on a vertical wall, and just aim it straight out, or mount it on a horizontal wall, and that thing pivots a lot. It's got a little slot for an SD card underneath that panel. 4 megapixel resolution. This model has a 3.6 millimeter lens, and it was delivered in 3 days from Amazon for $85. The mounting base is plastic, but it feels like a very solid plastic. The wires can, of course, come up through the center and be completely concealed, or they can go out through this cable tray area, which is conveniently marked on the mounting bracket. We'll look at that in just a second. So why did I pick this particular brand and type of camera, and why should you? Well, to figure that out, let's look at who uses these cameras. Cameras are very popular right now, and there's a don't care group who just buys a camera, maybe just looks at it on their mobile phone, and they don't really care about the underlying technology. That's fine, but I imagine since you're watching this video, you probably fall in the second group, which is I call them the DIY group. These people, like me a couple of years ago, just said, hey, I'm going to buy one of these camera kits and install it. And you start to worry about things like, where is my data? Let's look at the picture quality and resolution, things the don't care group doesn't care about. Moving on from that, if your curiosity remains after your initial install, you move into what I call the hobbyist group. In the hobbyist group, you quickly become aware of a bunch of different things. Like, there's a lot nicer cameras than the ones that come with those kits. You can try different cameras. You can try different accessories. You quickly become aware that there's a lot better software. You dump that vendor software, go with something like Blue Iris. There's a lot of different areas to explore, like always-on display panels, custom cameras, all sorts of different things you can play around with when you're a hobbyist. And that's where I'm talking to you from, as sort of a hobbyist. Looking forward from a hobbyist, the next group I call the experts and the pros. These folks are people who really understand the advanced details. A lot of those guys are on these websites like ipcamtalk.com, and what you learn about them is they prefer 1 or 2 particular brands, like Hikvision, for example, or Dahua. And so the reason I picked this camera is it's basically a non-branded Dahua camera. And there's lots of evidence to support this. And one of the main features of a Dahua camera is something called starlight, which refers to its low light sensitivity. And so this is basically like an entry-level Dahua starlight camera. And typically those cameras are a lot more expensive. But the easiest thing to do is just show you what this did for my night vision. Here's the old camera, which I thought was pretty good. It's from about 2014. You see the cat walking down there, and there's a car going by. And here's the new camera. You see the cat down there too. The new camera is so much sharper and clearer, don't you think? Mm-hmm. And this is just out of the box, really, without any tweaking at all. And here they are side by side. It's also worth mentioning this camera is so sensitive, it stays in color mode longer than any of my other cameras till the sun goes down, which, by 8 o'clock, it's still showing color. All the other cameras have switched to night. And I think all that's adjustable. We'll do some more pictures samples in a minute. Now let's talk about hardware installation. There's a little plate that clips on the bottom of the camera, and that's really all you need. If you want to route the wire out underneath the camera, you just pop out that little plastic tab and attach the wire there, and then the plate slides on top. In addition to running the wire out the side, there's a more traditional mounting method of running the wires up the center, sort of underneath the camera, and they're completely out of sight. And I ended up using both of these methods. When you run the wires out the center, you can just do it with the plate and drill a hole into your wood surface, or use something like this. This is a junction box. And the reason I use this junction box is because I ended up putting a little Ethernet switch in there, which is the subject of another video. But let's unclip this plate and install it outside. Oh, it's also worth noting that it has holes marked single gang, which do fit on a single gang junction box if you ever had to mount it on a single gang junction box and put the wires inside that. Here's what it looks like mounted outside with nothing else but the little plate that came in the box, the flush mount with the wire going out. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to clip it and unclip it if you need to work on it or whatever. And here's what it looks like with the junction box underneath it. Now that little black wire, I have to explain, going out the side, normally you wouldn't see that. That is actually not powering this camera. It's powering another camera a few inches away. Just pretend that's not there and you kind of get an idea of what that looks like. But anyway, the hardware installation was super easy and you really don't need anything but what's in the box. Software setup was really painless on this camera. They took an interesting approach. The cameras come with a fixed IP address, so you just plug it in, you go to that address and set it up. I only had 2 cameras, so I had to do them one at a time, so the addresses wouldn't conflict. Not sure what you'd do if you had a bunch of them. First time you connect to the web UI, you have to enter the time and country. It does ask you for a password, which I wasn't too thrilled about. I suppose if you used it as a standalone camera at a lake house or something, you might use some of the options. It does have a ton of options on the web UI. I didn't use any of the online sort of stuff because I'm just connecting it to Blue Iris. I found the web UI to be really good and responsive, and it shows full motion video on Chrome without any sort of plugins. Anyway, we'll go through some of these things there. I went in and set it up. One of the first things I did was go to my router, give this a fixed IP address, and then set this to DHCP mode. Now let's talk about video stream and picture quality settings, which are probably the things you would be adjusting most on this camera. First, the video stream settings. This is where you set the resolution and other parameters that control how data is transmitted out of the camera. First, the encoding mode. It seems like Blue Iris would work with any of these options. I just left this at the default of H.264. There's also a smart codec option, which seems to be about saving bandwidth. I left that turned off. I have a gigabit network, shouldn't have any problems with bandwidth. The only setting you really care about on this screen is probably resolution. It defaults to 2560 by 1440, and that's where I left it. You can go up to 2688 by 1520 or down several resolutions lower. I don't think I'd ever use anything below 1080p. In addition to resolution, you can set frames per second with maxing it out at either 20 or 30 depending on resolution. That affects picture smoothness. You can also do constant bit rate and set a bit rate, or variable bit rate and set a quality, and that again affects how much data goes across the wire. Other things on this screen include a watermark and a secondary stream. I turned both of these off since I wasn't using them. So speaking of resolution, let's just look at what the practical effects of this are. Here I am zooming in on an album cover about 20 feet away from the camera. Can you read the name of the mamas and the papas there? At the default resolution. It'll probably require some experimentation to figure out a resolution that makes a difference and achieves my level of picture quality that I want and disk space consumption. Now let's look at some picture quality setting features. These are all located under a menu item called Conditions. And here the web UI really shines because as soon as you update one of these settings, the change is instant. Like I can hit flip right here and it flips it around. And it's also instant in Blue Iris if you have that open in the background. But essentially you have these profiles, day and night in general, and so you can change one of these settings and then switch profiles and it remembers. So I set the brightness back, I go to a different profile and go back and it's changed. One of the overall settings available here is called style, and you've got standard, vivid, and soft. So that's standard. If we switch to vivid, you'll notice the grass here gets a little bit greener. Soft to me seems a little blurry, so far I've left mine on standard. And here is what it looks like at night in a full screen capture for Blue Iris. This is standard mode, and then we're going to switch over to soft mode. Again, it looks a little foggy when you go to soft mode, although it brightens it up a little bit. And then we're going to go over to vivid mode. And vivid mode's a little bit sharper, and then finally back to standard mode. And the next setting down there is the exposure settings, and you've got some settings for anti-flicker, and the noise reduction I think is best left on. Here it is off. It just kind of adds a lot of static to the screen, especially at night. So I left the noise reduction on. A lot of other picture quality settings on here like you'd see on a video camera: white balance, backlight compensation, some special options there to make your night vision clearer. Speaking of night vision, let's talk about how that relates to these day and night profiles. You've got a profile called General, Day and Night. Right now we're adjusting these settings for day. So let's just say each of these profiles represent a group of settings. So if I go over to the profile management section, you can see day is enabled all the time. I think that's what that means. Hadn't figured it out. If I go to day and night mode and hit save, then in theory, it's going to switch over to night profile at night time. So it'll have a different set of settings. So if I want to go to my night profile, and let's just say we turn the brightness down, and then I save that and go off the screen and back, it's going to tell me next time I come back to that screen, hey, you're in the day profile right now. So let's see what happens, because we're nearing darkness right now as I'm recording this, and see if it flips over to night. And yes, it did. It worked exactly like I thought it would. I noticed the brightness dropped, so I went back and looked at the camera, and it defaulted to the night profile next time I went into the admin user interface. Interestingly, when I'm on that day-night mode under profile management, I lose access to the sensitivity setting that tells me, the sensitivity of when it switches between day and night. So again, I don't know fully how this works, but I'm sure it is Googleable. In the profile management, it seems like you can choose a profile on all the time. There's a schedule mode. There's the general mode. There's, I guess, different options. Anyway, stepping through all the settings would be so boring. I'm just going to kind of wrap this up. Let me just point out one thing I've noticed that's a little negative. Here you see the browser window and the blue iris window in the background. Look at that car. It's a little jerky on the blue iris window. Wait till another car comes by. And again, I haven't experimented with frame rates. And I know that Blue Iris is doing a lot of stuff, but I do have a very beefy PC. It's got Ryzen 6-core processor, 32 gig of RAM, SSD, gigabit network. I did enable direct-to-disk recording, so maybe that will help with some free up Blue Iris from having to process so much camera stuff. But anyway, I've had this camera about a week. Really like it. Would definitely buy another one, and we'll just leave the video with a sort of a sample capture file from Blue Iris and leave it at that. What do you think?
I think it's pretty cool.
Anyway, that's about it.
And see you next time for another awesome video.
Bye-bye.